So if you're using cool season forages, which we can overseed the same acreage that we have the perennial warm season grasses there, you can even rely on grazing those through, usually we would be planting the cool season forages sometime in November or December. And then after 60 days or so, they would be ready to graze, and you could be grazing them for at least 3 months, if not more. So this is the way that we're trying to work this out on trying to extend the grazing season. But also we are able to stockpile, as you said, and we have several different grasses that we can do that. In Florida, the major grass that is used there is Bahia grass, but there's also a lot of rhizoma peanut.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show, brought to you by Wyzenetics. I'm Brian Arnell, and I'm coming to you from the campus of Oklahoma State University. Today, we're excited to have on Dr. Liliane Silva. She is an assistant professor and extension specialist at the Animal and Veterinary Sciences Department at Clemson University. Dr. Silva received her BS in agronomy and her MS in pasture and animal sciences from the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. She graduated with her PhD from the University of Florida and has worked as a postdoc fellow at Auburn University. Dr. Silva has statewide research and extension responsibilities under her forage-livestock extension program. Silva's research focuses on the development and management strategies to improve forage agronomic, nutrient responses, and animal performance and enhance production, sustainability, productivity, and resilience of ecosystems. Currently, her program's ongoing efforts include studies on grazing summer and winter cover crops, measuring greenhouse gases from forage livestock systems, determining soil carbon and nitrogen accumulation, and also heifer development on forage-based systems. Dr. Silva, it is a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I look forward to this today.
So share with us a little bit about how did you end up going from Brazil, going from Sao Paulo up into Florida, and now I've ended up in Clemson. Let us know a little bit about your path.
Sure. So as you said, I started my education there in Brazil at the University of Sao Paulo, the campus that's in Piracicaba, which is my hometown. And I've always wanted to go to the agronomy path. And then once I started my bachelor's, I did a lot of internships since day one, literally, until I found myself on the general area that I was interested in focusing on, which was pasture and animal science. And since my third year on my bachelor's, I was already doing research. We have some opportunities there as undergraduate research scholarship that I ended up doing that for a couple of years. And during that time, on my senior year, I came to U.S. to do internship at Texas AgriLife Research in Stephenville with Dr. Barry Lambert. And I had the opportunity to do a short internship that was already like my first contact with learning more about how things worked here at land-grant universities, and really sparked me to wanting to come back. Mm-hmm. But I returned to do my master's there with the same advisor that I had since 2010. And I ended up concluding my master's there, but I came back to US during that time to do a short-term exchange program during the MS under Dr. Sullenberger at the University of Florida. So during that time, I was able to really get more experience, but also start to exploring some scholarships to try to get to come back for my PhD program, because at that time I really wanted to be able to get a PhD here, already thinking about where I would like to go on my career. So I was able to get a scholarship and spent 4 years there at UF, and was a really good opportunity to work on that extended group that we have with several locations having forage teams, and we worked very collaboratively together there. And during that time, I ended up doing a lot of networking and getting to know some of Dr. Sullenberger's former students as well. And it's funny because my advisor from Brazil, it's Dr. Sullenberger's former student. And then I ended up going to Albert University under one of his former students as well, which is Kim Molinix. So all those connections that we are able to have under Dr. Sullenberger and his students, former students, was really helpful to build a path. And during the time I was at UF, Dr. Sullenberger is really great and well known for his work in research. But I also knew that I wanted to get more experience in extension because my goal was to get a position that had both research and extension. I was already involved in extension when I was in Brazil 14 years ago or more. So while there, I was doing kind of like shadowing the extension, forage extension specialist, Dr. Marcelo Valal at UF. And I was able to get some experience there. And then when I was about to defend my PhD, a postdoc position opened up in Albert. And I was able to go there and work under both the forages and the beef nutrition specialists, so Dr. Kilman and Dr. Jan Gillard. I really focused on trying to get a lot of experience and build my curriculum while I was there, and they were really helpful and really took that mentor role in helping me to guide where I wanted to go. So definitely I got a lot of experience there, and that was a differential when I was applying for a job. And I already made more connections at that point, and that really built me to be able to be qualified to be here today in Clemson.
Fantastic. So jumping right in, share with us some of the work you have currently ongoing.
So currently I have five graduate students. So I have some of them, they're working on more applied studies, so they have some extension portion as well. The major focus of my research here is on grazing systems. And we're really trying to emphasize to extend the grazing season that we can have in the Southeast, because here we have our winters are not as cold as other parts of the country. So we're really able to have something planted during that time that we would be able to graze. So one of my students, she's working on perennial warm season grass systems that we're looking at different forage mixtures and seeing how those can not only extend the grazing season by forage production, but also what is the impact of having those animals grazing that area, and really the plants putting some nutrients back into the system as well through legumes, through clovers particularly. We're looking at how that nutrient can be recycled and then help with the fertility that we're going to have on the perennial grass that will come back on spring. So this is one of like the major emphasis of my program right now. Another large area that I've been working with is measuring greenhouse gases emissions from soil, and then I'm also involved in measurements from animals. We're really lucky to be able to get one of those climate smart grants that came about 2 years ago. So we have one of the largest ones here in South Carolina, and this is a partnership between Clemson University and the SEC State University. And I'm one of the people responsible and heavily involved on the forages portion of that grant. So currently we have about 110 producers enrolled, and we're being able to collect data from on-farm to be able to measure some of those responses in a large scale in the state, which is awesome because we don't have estimates that were collected here yet for greenhouse gases. So we're being able to really generate those for the state. And this is going to be something that can play out in so many ways, including really building up the carbon markets for our producers in livestock systems, because this can be a possibility for them as row crop producers are already having that opportunity to sell carbon credits. I do a lot of different research topics. So another one, I'll promise, I'm an extension, I talk a lot, so you can cut me off.
Okay, good. We'll tell you what, let's jump, before I forget, let's jump into some of the other conversations. So tell me a little bit about Florida's grazing. So in Oklahoma,
sure,
in a typical system, we probably have to feed hay for about 120 days, if not better. And so some of our systems, looking at stockpiling some of our forages and some winter annual interseeding, we can get closer to only feeding hay for about 30 or 40 days, depending on rainfall. What is a traditional grazing window for Florida, and how are you really extending that to 365 if possible?
So usually in Florida is warmer than where I am here in Clemson, for example. I'm actually in Blackville, not in Clemson, but in South Carolina. So usually there we would be able to start grazing sometime in March, early April, depending on the rainfall that we're having that year. And then we would be able to graze until September, October. If we stockpile some areas, even November, December. So we're talking about a really long season. And if you, so before I mentioned that our winter is not as colder as you all are, or some other parts of the country. So if you're using cool season forages, which we can overseed the same acreage that we have the perennial warm season grasses there, you can even rely on grazing those through, usually we would be planting the cool season forages sometime in November or December. And then after 60 days or so, they would be ready to graze, and you could be grazing them for at least 3 months, if not more. So this is the way that we're trying to work this out, on trying to extend the grazing season. But also we are able to stockpile, as you said, and we have several different grasses that we can do that. In Florida, the major grass that is used there is Bahia grass, but there's also a lot of rhizoma peanut. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So it's a perennial legume, and all the forage researchers at UF, they have done a lot of work incorporating a rhizoma peanut into Bahia grass systems. And this has been a really good way to reduce the nitrogen fertilizer that producers are using, but also increasing the quality of that forage. So they are really able to use that to have better animal performance there.
Can you, now jumping up to where you're at Clemson, can you describe what the average grazing system is? What species, what rotation, and kind of the time frame that you work with in that region that you're at?
So South Carolina, it's kind of like the transition zone for where we can really use the major warm season perennials, but also we can use fescue. So literally half of the state in diagonal, we can use Bahia grass and Bermuda grass on that part, the south, mid to south part, and then really the upstate area, fescue, tall fescue will be the perennial grass that all the systems there will be using, because that area is too cold for the warm season perennials that we usually would use do well or better than fescue. So this is basically how we would be splitting the state here. And then if you're using a cool season perennial, you're going to be grazing from sometime in October, November through June. If you stockpile, you're really able to get to June and July. And then the warm season is the opposite. So you would start grazing in April through June. We have a lot of droughts here. So this is definitely something that end up some years, especially for example, this year, we had severe drought in early summer throughout most of the summer for some parts of the state. And also we are in a drought again in early fall. And it's something that it's part of research that I'm doing as well to try to access what are the mixtures that we can use that will really do better under those conditions, for example. So our this part where we have the warm season grasses is where I'm working with the overseeded systems. And I'm about to plant a study next week that I usually start grazing in February and go through May most of the years here.
So you brought up something that intrigues me. If we need to go in another direction, that's fine too in the conversation. But you mentioned the drought that you're in and have been in, and to be honest, in the Great Plains, we're also seeing similar drought.
Uh-huh.
Your system and our system is built quite differently. You know, we can go to my western region where they're only getting 12 to 16 inches of rainfall. So stocking rate in that region might be one cow-calf per 20 to 50 acres in the extreme nature. Mm-hmm. Can you describe some of the stocking intensities that you may see in South Carolina, specifically in your region, and some of the approaches that you're seeing the producers take right now with the drought stress? And what are they planning on? Is it buying hay? Is it feeding rations? And how do they mitigate the availability of forages?
So usually, most of the time, our rule of thumb will be 1.5 acre per head if you really want to try to extend your grazing season here. Because then we're talking about needing to have something for the animals to graze during the cool and the warm season, which would maybe have like 60 to 80 days that you would not really have anything for the animals to graze. So you would need to be buying something. Because of how productive our grasses are, the best approach always is to try to just, for example, when we're on an average year, and this is even a joke, right? What is an average year? Nobody really knows. And a lot of my producers who have been farming for like 50 years, they joke about that. But if we are on a year that we're getting rainfall, and the reason that I'm mentioning rainfall is that in South Carolina, we do not have a lot of irrigated grazing or hay area even. This is not as common here for forage production as it would be in other states, even in the region. Some other states, they have more acreage that are irrigated. So one thing that a lot of producers do is when they are on the peak of the production of the season for that particular grass, they harvested some parts of the field for hay. One of the major resources that a lot of people start looking at is to produce baleage, which is the hay with higher moisture. So we're talking about something that would be baled at 40 to 6% water, and that can be conserved for a long period of time. One of the major reasons that we're doing this here is because even though we're struggling with rain a lot of times, during summer, usually we end up not having the window to dry hay that we would need to. So sometimes it's better to just be able to cut the forage and then remove on the next day, literally, for baleage. So you can really have that for later. Most producers are trying to do one of these two things, producing bale is more expensive because you need specialized equipment, and it's really expensive to have that. So usually you need to hire somebody to do for you, especially on smaller acreages. And buying some byproducts is cheaper than actual ratio, like balanced ratios.
Mm-hmm.
So this would even be what producers might need to try to do before they are buying the ratios, just because the average producer here has like 50 acres and 35 cattle. This is the majority of the producers.
When you say that, are you speaking to DDGs, like dried distiller grains, or what are you speaking of?
We usually will be looking at what byproducts we have around here. So, for example, byproducts from
Okay.
cotton production, soybean production. Those are the major things that we have here. We do have some larger farmers that would be buying those or producing silage. We do not have a lot of dairy here, so there's not a lot of people doing silage, but there's some.
Well, folks, today we have on Liliane Silva. She's a state extension specialist with Clemson University, and we've been talking about her work in the forages system, and I want to transition a little bit for the end of our conversation. I want to dive into the interesting aspect you brought up earlier about your work in greenhouse emissions.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of dive into some of the stuff you've been finding out and learning as you look into that pasture system and the forage system as far as greenhouse gas emissions.
Sure. So we were really lucky to get one of those large climate smart grants that allow us to buy some of the equipment that we need to scale the measurements on farm. So right now we have some farms that we're collecting data and really trying to, for example, there's chambers that we can put on the ground on pastures, and we have been collecting the greenhouse measurements for areas where we are doing the kind of like the management, the conventional management versus incorporating improved management practice. So we have research that corroborates with what are some of the practices that we can look into for pastures and forage systems to reduce emissions on farm. So we have been having some producers that are incorporating those, and now we're measuring to really estimate if that's working or not on these several sites that we're going to be measuring. And this is a long-term study. It's going to last 5 years. So it's really going to allow us to have some time, long time to compare and to get the information.
So you mentioned also in the introduction about working into the thought process of these forage systems in the carbon market. And that kind of intrigues me because in the cropping systems world, we typically think the introduction of no-till or reduced till along with potential cover crops is methodologies to sequester carbon, which in my realm is the forage system. To me, the livestock producers that are grazing and haying, they are doing that already. That's the system they work in. So can you dive into a little bit about how you see the forage producers can get into the carbon market and the livestock producers?
Absolutely. You're spot on what you said. That we are really trying to have that coverage extended throughout the longest period that we can have on the areas. But we can also have some management practices, for example, inclusion of legumes. They are going to be fixing nitrogen biologically. So we reduce the carbon footprint of the activity by not having to purchase inorganic sources outside. So we're really trying to look at the life cycle assessment, and through the grazing management that we're doing, so improving the use of rotational grazing instead of continuous grazing. This is another practice that can really help with making the forage stand stronger and more resilient. That's going to last long and have better carbon accumulation over time. Then something that could be overgrazing and really contributing to a decline of the stand or some other issues on the long term. So through some of the practices that we're using, even the resources, another practice that we're using is poultry application. So definitely some things that we can use to improve the carbon accumulation, nutrient recycling.
It's time for our famous three.
I'm going to be honest, Dr. Silva, I think I could spend another 15, 20 minutes at least visiting with you, but we're coming up on our time restrictions. So it's been a ton of fun, but I've got to close this up with our three final questions I get to visit with everybody about. And so when you have a question, and for me, you're a perfect scenario for this as you have moved around and you've been a lot of places, what's a go-to resource when you have a question about what you're doing?
A lot of my mentors, and I have people with different expertise that I reach out to them, or even really like something that, and you probably agree as well, something that's really important for us is our networking and those mentors that we build along the time over our training. So most of the time, if I don't know something, they will probably have had that experience before, and I reach out to them as needed. And I've been really lucky to have those people behind me and with me that have been able to help. But also there are some resources. I can share some of the books, etc., that are like the Bibles that we use. So definitely some of those resources as well.
Fantastic. Now, I know as a tenure track early career faculty, you have a ton of free time. So what do you do as a leisurely activity?
Usually I like to hike and read. So like you said, we have a lot of time to do those things, but I try to really emphasize, especially for like mental health and having a break. That's really important. I feel that I'm not as creative when I'm too overwhelmed. So I learned to really take the time to just go and walk and do something else to just clear my mind.
And finally, where do people go to find more about your program and what you're doing in Clemson?
Sure. So I do have a few social media channels, but all of them are under the same name. So it's called Forage Drops. I produce weekly content for those, and I share about the research and extension programs that I'm doing here, and also some general topics and concepts about forage and livestock systems. And I've been doing this for a couple of years now, so it has been a really good experience, and I definitely have some content there.
Well, fantastic. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of the Crop Science Podcast Show presented by Wisenetics. Thanks for joining us today with our guest, Dr. Liliane Silva, Assistant Professor and Extension Specialist at the Animal and Veterinary Sciences Department at Clemson University. Folks, remember to subscribe to our channel and click on that bell to receive notifications when we have a new podcast drop. Also, if you enjoyed what you heard today, share the video with your friends, neighbors, peers, and colleagues. Leave us a comment if you have any questions or have suggestions for a new guest. Dr. Silva, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate and I look forward to having just later another opportunity.